watching Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Ed Hernandez, member of the California State Senate. He is chair of the Senate Health Committee, and later on in our discussion, we'll be speaking about health care reform. But we start our conversation focusing on the budget, and I want to speak with you, sir, about the governor's proposed budget, which he says is in balance.
Yes. Well,
do you believe him?
I believe him.
You do?
And we actually saw the numbers, but more importantly, and here's what's even more exciting, is the fact that we will now move forward and not have to worry about putting up tough votes to make cuts so we can balance the budget.
Let me ask you though, because over the last few years we've seen huge cuts. I mean, there was a deficit a few years ago of $45 billion.
Right.
And so while we may be in balance now, there were so many cuts in the past few years. Are we able, and is there a desire to restore some of the money lost over the last 3-4 years?
Well, you know, that's obviously the big question and what the legislature is going to have to deal with. But what's most important is we have made some tough decisions. We've balanced the budget. We've done our fiduciary responsibility along with the governor, who's done an incredible job. More importantly, the voters have trusted the fact that they voted for Prop 30 to allow us to restore education. And more importantly, we need to make sure we reduce that debt that we borrowed and move forward.
And let's talk about the debt. I first want to ask you though, do you want to see some restoration of the money lost over the last few years, or do we just have to move on and let's go from here?
Well, you know, what's most important for me is to make sure that the economy picks up, people get back to work, so that we can have more revenues that come into the state so that we can restore those things that we cut. I obviously want to restore health and human services, but what I
We'll get there.
But what I don't want to do is restore them, have the economy tank again, and have to cut them again. I want to make sure that we're fiscally sound and the state is on good footing and we can move forward.
I want to speak about the debt. I recently chatted with Treasurer Lockyer, and his view is that the governor's budget is dealing with the debt in an appropriate, expeditious way. There are others who would argue that this proposed budget doesn't pay down enough of the debt quickly enough. What's your sense?
You know, it does start to pay down the debt. Perhaps maybe not as much, but keep in mind the debt that we have, which needs to be zeroed out.
Right.
A big difference from previous years where we had to make cuts and pay down very little debt. I really believe as the economy picks up, more revenues come in, and as we put money into the debt repayment, it will be done, and it should be done in a very quick manner.
Okay, let's shift to health care. I understand that on January 24th, the governor called a special session to focus on some health care issues.
Right.
For those of us that don't really exactly know what a special session means, why don't you just give us a quick primer?
Sure. Well, the reason why we call special session is because we have to have legislation enacted prior to 2014 when the exchange starts to sell a product.
The healthcare exchange.
The healthcare exchange. Now, if we did it on a normal session, it would be signed into law, but wouldn't go into effect on January 1, and they need to have that implemented now. By doing a special session, which will run concurrently with the work we're going to be doing.
So that's the key. It's not as if you have to dedicate time to this and you're not on recess, so you just continue the work at hand.
It runs concurrently. We put the bill in front of the governor's desk, signs it, then it becomes law immediately after that.
And as it relates to the exchanges, that's what's critical.
Correct.
So is that the only issue that we will see dealt with during this special session?
Yes.
The exchange issue.
The only thing we're going to be dealing with is healthcare and addressing the issue of healthcare, and that's why he called it only on that topic.
But is it just on exchanges, or you can address other issues?
No. And the issues we're going to be addressing, there's several. Number one is the market reform bill, which once it's signed will allow the consumers the protections that they're going to need for the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. The basic health plan, the one I had been working on, we've been working with the governor's office. They are, I believe,
Sir, you've been working
committed.
on it for so long.
2 years, 2 years.
Why don't you explain to us what the basic health plan's goals are? Because, you know, it can get a bit inside baseball, but we know that certain people can get private insurance, certain people can get subsidies, but there's kind of a middle ground. And isn't that what the basic health plan is looking to address?
Here's, to me, in the basic form of explanation, is it's health care at a reasonable cost for the working poor. Keep in mind that someone who is going to be asked to buy health insurance, even with a subsidy, is going to have to pay up to 10% of their annual income for that health insurance. These are individuals between 133 to 200% of poverty level. Someone who is going to have to make a decision between buying food and buying health insurance, they're not going to be able to afford it, even with a subsidy. What this is going to do, it's going to help that segment of the population afford health care at a lower out-of-pocket and a much better product.
So why is it that you face such challenges getting this plan through the legislature in the past couple of years?
The reason why is because there's a finite amount of money that's available. Okay, so if you're going to provide that in a discounted price to a consumer, somebody's going to make less money. So the opposition is going to usually comes from the individuals that are going to get paid, and that's the plans, it's going to be the hospitals, it's going to be the providers, because they want to obviously make more money if they were to get that patient through the exchange. But to me, that segment of the population needs the break the most.
So are you confident that given we have an improving economy, the budget's now in the black, that this plan that you've championed so diligently for so many years will make it through?
Well, I mean, there's no guarantee, but I feel more
course.
comfortable because now we're getting direction from the governor's office and the administration that they want to hear this in special session. We have not gotten federal guidance on it from the basic health plan, so we're going to do kind of a hybrid version of it through the exchange. The exchange has been engaged. They're actually discussing it at their meetings. So I feel much more confidence that we'll get on the governor's desk and we'll get a signature.
Now, we know that the Obama reform plan continues to be controversial. Although, interestingly, since the Supreme Court upheld the plan, it seems as if support for, as we know it, Obamacare is on the rise. We know there are some states that are refusing to adopt certain elements of the Obamacare plan. Where does California fall in that calculus?
California is way ahead of everyone else. The states that are refusing to participate in the Medicaid expansion, because as you know, the Supreme Court ruled that it's constitutional, it is a tax, but that states aren't forced to take or do the Medicaid expansion. California is way ahead. My only concern has been when the administration was humming and hemming whether or not to do the full expansion, because obviously potential cost.
And you talk about the administration in Sacramento.
Yeah, in Sacramento, because of potential cost to the state. However, if we move forward with it, in order to move forward, you have to fully implement it, and you'll get 100% funding, and after 3 years, it'll go to 90% and stays at 90%, whereas traditional Medicaid funding right now is a 50-50 match. We can't leave that dollar on the table and get as many people insured as we can.
So I understand the governor did allocate, I think it was $350 million towards a Medicaid expansion in his proposed budget. Is that enough? I mean,
yes. What the $350 million is to get the expansion of it, to get it implemented and get it started. The funding is going to come from the federal government to insure these individuals up to 138% of poverty level.
Now, is there a concern that because some states are refusing to adopt the Medicaid expansion, that California could see a flood of folks coming in seeking medical care?
You know, I don't know if that's necessarily a concern. Not any different than what people want to come here because of the great sunshine and the, the environment. But my biggest concern is United States of America is the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't offer some sort of health care. We are now moving in that direction. History is written. It's moving. My concern is the people that need that care, the most vulnerable in the red states, aren't going to get it, and they're going to suffer.
And the irony, some would argue, is that those in red states often see the highest underinsured and uninsured rates in the nation. And yet those Republican governors, for better or for worse, are not accepting the Medicaid expansion formulas. And so those folks won't see that expansion. There is a lingering concern among small businesses. Depends how you define small businesses, but businesses with 50 or more, they're being required to provide health care. This is a federal mandate, not a state mandate. What are you hearing?
You know, there are concerns, but here's what will help them with lowering their costs, because what is the biggest question and the biggest concern that small businesses have when it comes to healthcare? It's increasing costs that they have to deal with. Well, when you're a small business, you don't have the large buying power that, let's say, large companies do. So they're at a much bigger disadvantage.
But
now, through the exchange, they can now buy, and the state of California is going to negotiate on their behalf, and they're going to have much more better buying power.
So that's the goal.
Because they have a lot more people in the exchange.
His name is Ed Hernandez, member of the California State Senate. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're still with us today. Our guest is David Vela. He is a member of the Montebello Unified School Board. He serves as its clerk. He's also a candidate for the Los Angeles Community College District. That election will be held on March 5th. But first I want to speak about K-12, then we'll proceed to K-14. Let's talk about K-12, and I want to get a sense from you about how important it was to school districts that Prop 30 did pass, which it did, of course, in November.
Well, it was really important. I think that obviously across the table, everyone came together. As you saw, it was one of the biggest labor movements in many years.
That's an understatement. I mean,
that is an understatement.
I think it's fair to say that many argue that labor handed Prop 30 a victory, in large part because they were coming out against Prop 32. And so they put Prop 30 in their kind of campaign, and so it was big victories for yes on 30, no on 32.
Right, everyone benefited from it. I think what's most important is that for a long time, education was really placed in the back burner. We had obviously gone through such an economic crisis, and when you really look at the numbers, for example, of ADA, how much money we get per pupil, right. We were really getting down to very low numbers.
Well, as I understand it, the per pupil spending in California, when compared to other states, we come in at 47th.
Right.
We're supposed to be the golden state,
right.
And we come in at 47th in per pupil spending.
Yeah, it is definitely a problem. I think Prop 30 is going to be really just, unfortunately, it's just going to backfill some of the expenditures.
And that's what I've heard, and I think it's important that the public understand that Prop 30 does not give new money. It prevented cuts of money that could, right. From what I'm told, have been disastrous.
No, absolutely. It held us together. At the same time, it really was a message out to the voters that school districts in particular need the money. We need to prioritize it in California and continue to support education. It really is important for the future. As you know, in California, our school districts are also put to the same standards. And actually, California has very high standards when it comes to testing, when it comes to API and APY scores.
And what's interesting is, during this fiscal crisis, California's standardized test scores were increasing.
Right.
You would have thought that as class sizes are growing, as students are being pinched left, right, and center because of budget cuts, we still see tremendous growth in API and STAR tests. What went right?
You know, I really have to give the credit to our teachers, and especially to the fact that they were willing to work with us board members through this. And they were saying, you know what, we need to keep the quality high. However, we still need the money to continue to come to the unified school districts, because it's been a long time since we've had any type of increase in our budget. As a matter of fact, again, Prop 30 is just going to kind of put some stabilization, but we still need the extra money for us to survive.
I do want to ask you about a proposal that was set forth by Governor Brown in his 2013-2014 proposed budget. And that would be changing the funding formulas whereby school districts that had economically disadvantaged children could get more money than school districts with more affluent families.
Well, you know, what we're seeing is that a lot of the more affluent school districts have the opportunity to go to the parents and actually have them, you know, submit or have more funding for that school.
That's true.
Our school districts, in particular LA County, when you really look at it, it is tough for us to go to parents. A lot of LA County is working class, is middle class, and so this would kind of equalize that issue.
I'm just wondering if that will cause just so much anger amongst these kind of suburban soccer moms, if I can use that cliche.
Right.
You know, we are all Californians, and it's one thing to give a school district more money for gifted programs or for programs for children that have challenges, but to base it solely on kind of the economic element.
Right. I think that a lot of the school districts that are doing well, Montebello Unified is one of them that has balanced their budget, has not laid off permanent teachers. They understand the need in some of the more urban and some of the more needy school districts. I don't think there's going to be World War III about it, but I do think that some districts might bring that up as, you know, not being fair. But again, I think the governor is doing it just to kind of really level the playing
But
field.
do you think it will pass? Do you think the legislature signs on?
I got to tell you, that's for us to look into the future. I can't really predict that.
I want to shift gears and talk about the community colleges, because we also know that community colleges took a tremendous hit during this economic crisis. Prop 30 did pass. Prop 30 does give money to community colleges. Prop 38 did not. It didn't pass. So as a candidate for the Community College Board here in Los Angeles, what do you make of how Prop 30 interfaces with the community colleges?
Well, there's a lot more work to do. Prop 30 really is just backfilling, again, a lot of the cuts that were done throughout the years. In particular, for LA Community College District, it's going to be a big deal because that money, either the Board of Trustees are going to spend it on providing expansion, which means more courses, offerings, or they're going to spend it on just maintaining the current classes and the current level of staffing.
Here's a challenge I've always wondered about. We know that over the last couple of years, the fee per unit for community colleges has spiked. $26, $36, now $46. Now, presumably, it will stabilize. It's the biggest spike in the nation, but the community colleges in California are still the cheapest in the nation, the least expensive, I should say. And so I wonder if that causes the likelihood of an increase when times do get a little dicey.
I think the increases are welcomed at times of need. However, when you really look at the problem, and that is that everyone's suffering economically, then you increase the fees for people who are not doing well in their homes and at their jobs, then it's not the right time. What Prop 30 will do, again, is just to backfill the cuts. We're hoping that the state legislature and the governor, they envision that the fees should be stopped, and I think that that's the right move. In the future, those fees could be scaled down depending on how. Well, not.
Will we see a drop in fees?
I don't think you could see a drop right away, but you can see a stabilization, and depending on how the California economy does in the next 10 years.
I have to ask you about adult education. Adult education, traditionally in California, has been operated through the K-12 system. Now the governor is looking to have it put into the community college system. In some ways it makes sense, but it would be a complete sea change. What do you think about this proposal?
Well, adult education is a different animal. As being K-12, as a school board member currently.
Right. So you know both sides.
I know both sides, and I do know that adult ed is extremely local. It's in the communities. Our colleges, in particular LACCD, the challenge that they will have implementing adult ed is that they're not going to have that direct communication with the community, the buildings necessary to really go into the communities. The communities are going to have to go into the colleges, and that's what's going to be tough about it.
Well, this proposal has not made it through the legislature, so we don't know if it will happen.
Right.
But let's presume you're successful in March. Will you be speaking out against the proposal? Do you think it is the wrong move?
I really think that it really depends at the time, because some school districts are doing well with an adult ed, including Montebello Unified. LA Unified let it go because they weren't doing well with it.
So who's doing it?
Well, LA Unified's doing some of it. They let a lot of it go.
Oh, I see.
My point is that it's really going to be individual to the communities.
But under the governor's plan, I don't think the communities would have a choice. Of course, the plan is not fully baked, but
we still have to see. K-12 is going to probably want to keep, some of K-12 is going to want to keep their adult ed. So that's going to be obviously something the legislature is going to have to iron out.
In our final moments, you're doing well at Montebello Unified. Why are you running for the community college district?
I really believe that there needs to be that connection between K-12 and we talked about higher ed. When I ran for school board in Montebello, it was really about access to higher ed for my community. I'm a big believer that's the great equalizer in our country. So I really want to connect the dots, link learning, multiple pathways, some of the curriculum that could connect them to having high school students get college credit. I really want to embark in that journey.
His name is David Vela. He is a member of the school board in Montebello Unified. He is running for the Los Angeles Community College District. That election will be held on March 5th. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. We are now joined by Norma Dominguez. She is the co-chair of Latina History Day. We'll tell you about it in a moment. It will be held on March 8th in downtown Los Angeles. The sponsoring organization is known as HOPE. It's an organization I have known about for quite some time. One of our executives here at Charter has been involved in HOPE for, it seems like decades. Why don't you tell us what HOPE is before we talk about Latina History Day?
Sure. HOPE stands for Hispanas Organized for Political Equality. The organization promotes women in California, really across the nation, to exercise their political voice and strength.
You are being so humble because there have been some bona fide success stories out of HOPE.
Yes.
I think we have a labor secretary named Hilda Solis, isn't that her name?
Yes, the secretary.
She came through HOPE.
She did,
yeah.
Yes.
So that's just but one example
Yes.
of graduates of HOPE
Yes.
who have just soared to tremendous heights. And you participated in what's known as the HOPE Leadership Institute.
Correct.
Tell us about that.
Sure. The HOPE Leadership Institute is a 9-month curriculum where HOPE invites 20 or so women from across the state of California to partake in different weekend seminars. We learn about the state of Latinas, of different communities in California, health, education, learn about policy, meet legislators, and really
powerful women
yes.
who are doing great things in our great
Absolutely.
state.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I've met so many of your sisters in crime, if I may say, as part of the HOPE family, and one is more successful than the next. I mean, I'm really just incredibly compelled at how HOPE has been able to grow the Latina in ways that they should grow.
No, absolutely, and we see each other everywhere. I'm from Los Angeles. I can be in San
you guys
Francisco, and it'll come up in conversation. So it is a great network.
Okay, so let's talk about Latina History Day. It's the 22nd annual, and tell us about the event on March 8th, and we'll talk more about it.
On March 8th, HOPE is having its 22nd annual Latina History Day. It's a empowering, wonderful day. Goes throughout the entire day. We have concurrent workshops led, facilitated by executives, legislators, elected officials,
and some remarkable speakers, well-known speakers. One of my colleagues, Maria Hinojosa, who's a broadcast journalist, Eva Longoria, who became very involved in the political process last year. Who else have you had at your conferences?
We have had
Maria Shriver. I'll help you. I got the list. You don't. Maria Shriver. She was the First Lady of California. Catherine Sandoval from the Public Utilities Commission, Pulitzer Prize winner. I mean, the list goes on.
Yes, and really the purpose of the day is to motivate the over 800 participants who come from across the state of California for this one day to inspire and motivate them to reach their next level of greatness, whatever that may be in the corporate sector.
And so let's talk about that, because for better or for worse, a lot of individuals, this is not specific to Latin nations by any stretch, but they just would rather not get involved. It's just in the home country, if you got involved in government, it was dangerous, it was corrupt, it wasn't worth the risk. Obviously, America is not that way.
Right.
Being involved is part of the beauty of this American democracy. So obviously, we're talking now second, third generation, our generations. I mean, I come from immigrants as well. But still, there's that reticence to get involved. How are you able to help Latinos recognize the benefit, or Latinas, I should say, recognize the benefits of civic engagement, civic involvement?
Well, I think the purpose of HOPE is really to know that decisions are made at every level, at the city council, school boards, commissions, as the state legislature and Congress, and that it really does take women and other communities to be at that table in order to move what we call our democracy forward.
And it matters.
Absolutely,
I mean, it really does matter. For so many
does.
decades, we didn't hear that voice of the Latino who has become such a vibrant part of our great state. I'm sure you read that, is it by the end of the year, I think California will be majority Latino. I mean, the demographics are startling in the best sense. I mean, I love the fact that we're part of this great melting pot. How does that make you feel when you look back at those forerunners. I mean, but for some of these I mean, even before Hilda Solis, I mean, some remarkable women in this state. I'm trying to think, who are the early elected Latinas in California?
Well, certainly Supervisor Gloria Molina.
Oh, of course. Yeah, she had been LA City Council. Was she in Sacramento?
She was in the state legislature and then joined the Board of Supervisors.
Right.
So it really, I mean, for my generation, I grew up already knowing and seeing some of those figures. Some of my early mentors were women, were Latinas. And so it's incumbent on me to keep that moving forward.
Where'd you grow up, if I may ask?
Oh, sure. I grew up in the Wilmington area of the city of Los Angeles.
So you grew up in the neighborhood.
I grew up in the neighborhood.
And I think it's fair to say you've done pretty darn well.
I've done okay,
Yeah,
yes.
you work at Wells Fargo. You're a vice president.
I did.
How is that for you? It's almost survivor's guilt in some ways, if I can say that. I mean, how is it for you that you've been such a tremendous success and you can go back and speak to your community and say, look, we can do this?
Yeah, well, I went to really great schools. I went to Brown University and Harvard Kennedy School, and I got there because people early on told me, there's education is the key to success.
I got to ask you.
Sure.
I spoke with someone recently, and on our show, and I reminded them and reminded myself. My father, we descend from Eastern European immigrants, and my father was admitted to 2 universities in the late 50s. Columbia University, you've heard of it, it's an Ivy League. Yeah, and Brooklyn College of Pharmacy. Okay. So he went to Brooklyn College of Pharmacy because his cousin went to Brooklyn College of Pharmacy. And that's the immigrant experience. Right. For so many, there's just no knowledge of what to do, where to go. How is it that you were, well, he didn't have mentors like apparently you did.
Yeah, I did have mentors.
And that's what Hope is.
Yes, for adult women, and we have a lot of programming also for youth, but primarily focus on Latina women. When I was younger, I was introduced to other organizations. I'm actually chair of a statewide all-volunteer organization, the Chicano Latino Youth Leadership Project, and that was instrumental in me seeing a bigger vision for myself.
Brown.
Yes.
Who gets into Brown from California? I mean, it's one of the most competitive schools in the nation.
A lot of Californians. Yeah, it's a great school, and now what organizations like CIYLP did for me at that stage of my life, Hope is doing for women at this stage of our lives.
So convince our viewers that we have to go on March 8th. I would go if I could. I may actually do a drop-by.
Yes, do a drop-by. Please stop by. Invite women from across California to log on to latinas.org. Find out about Latina History Day. It's an amazing day. It's where we don't miss it.
I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar.
Yeah, people in
you play Helen Reddy in the background, or a Latin version of Helen Reddy?
It's a great day. It's something that has become a tradition for many Latinas who I know to attend this day because it centers you for that next chapter of your life.
So would a college student be a target attendee, if I can use that term? A high school student? Who's your perfect attendee?
Perfect attendee is a professional at any stage. College graduates.
College graduate would be best.
Yeah, college graduates. We have a small number of slots for college women, but by far it really is for the professional or aspiring professional Latinas who want to know about their next steps and really inform those next steps and get inspired by other women who've been there, done that, and are going to do even better things.
It's amazing. Every woman I meet from Hope is just more remarkable than the next. I am so impressed with the organization. I am so glad you came onto the program.
For having me.
Of course, again, the event is on March 8th. It is at the downtown Los Angeles Biltmore Hotel. You can sign on, as Norma said, to latinas.org if you'd like to learn more about Latina History Day. My name is Brad Pomerance. I want to thank Norma Dominguez for joining us on Charter California Edition.
Thank you.